Hello, and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Beneath the Surface. Dominic Harlow stared at the reflection in his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. 10 years of marriage had taught him patience. 10 years of secrets had taught him caution. Dumb. We're going to be late. Veronica's voice carried from downstairs, tinged with that familiar edge of irritation she no longer bothered to hide. He smiled thinly at his reflection. Coming, dear. At 42, Dominic didn't look like much. Average height, slightly thinning brown hair, and a physique that suggested a desk job and occasional weekend jogs. Nothing about him screamed success or power. And that was precisely how he wanted it. Veronica waited by the door, checking her phone. At 38, she remained strikingly beautiful. Long blonde hair, expertly maintained figure, and the kind of polished appearance that came from regular spa treatments and designer clothes. Treatments and clothes that Dominic supposedly couldn't afford. Finally, she muttered, not looking up from her screen. I told Skylar we'd be there by 7. Dominic nodded, opening the door for her. Wouldn't want to keep your sister waiting. The drive to the restaurant was silent. Dominic watched Veronica from the corner of his eye as she texted rapidly, a small smile playing at her lips. He knew who she was texting. He knew everything. 5 years ago, Dominic had nearly confronted her when he first discovered the affair. But then he realized the value of patience. Instead of exposing what he knew, he began constructing something far more intricate. A long game where every humiliation, every betrayal, every mocking comment was cataloged, measured, and would eventually be repaid. To the world, to Veronica, her family, even his own brother, Dominic was a failed entrepreneur, a man who couldn't hold on to success, who lived off his wife's family connections for the occasional consulting job. The reality was something else entirely. Beneath the unremarkable exterior lived a man with extraordinary talents. Before meeting Veronica, Dominic had worked in specialized security operations for clients whose names never appeared in public records. He had skills in information gathering, behavioral analysis, and tactical planning that would make most intelligence agencies take notice. But he had walked away from that life when he fell in love with Veronica Tate, the dazzling marketing executive from a respected Boston family. When they married, he had promised himself to be just Dominic Harlow, loving husband, potential father, average American man. That promise had died slowly, bled dry by Veronica's gradual contempt, her family's condescension, and the shocking betrayal of his own brother, Perry, who had aligned himself with the Tate's assessment that Dominic was, fundamentally, a disappointment. As they pulled into the upscale restaurant's parking lot, Dominic spotted Skylar's Mercedes already there, alongside Perry's Audi. He also noted a black SUV with tinted windows parked discreetly in the far corner. Right on time. Remember to smile, Veronica said, applying fresh lipstick. It's our anniversary, after all. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Dominic replied, his voice betraying nothing of what was to come. The maitre d' led them to a private dining area where Skylar, Perry, and Skylar's husband Abbott were already seated, cocktails in hand. The happy couple arrives, Skylar announced, her smile not reaching her eyes. At 40, Skylar was Veronica's older sister and constant critic, a woman who measured success exclusively in possessions and appearances. Perry, Dominic's younger brother by 4 years, stood to give him an insincere hug. Hey, big brother. 10 years, huh? Who would have thought? Not me, muttered Abbott into his whiskey, earning a sharp look from Skylar. Dominic accepted a glass of champagne, raising it slightly. To family, he said, his gaze sweeping across the table. And to getting exactly what we deserve. He noticed how Veronica kept checking her phone under the table, how Skylar and Perry exchanged knowing glances, how the empty chair at their table seemed to mock the celebration. The chair meant for the final guest, someone none of them was expecting. When Veronica excused herself to use the restroom, Dominic checked his watch. In exactly 17 minutes, everything would change. 10 years of playing the long game was about to pay off. He smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. Chapter 2. The Dinner. So, Dom, any exciting business prospects on the horizon? Abbott asked, swirling his third scotch. Unlike the others, Abbott's condescension stemmed from simple insecurity rather than malice. As Skylar's husband, he was merely parroting his wife's attitudes. Nothing worth mentioning, Dominic replied with practiced humility. Still consulting on a few projects. Skylar snorted delicately. Consulting. Is that what they call unemployment these days? Veronica returned, her face slightly flushed. Dominic noted the fresh lipstick, the subtle adjustment of her dress, the quick check of her phone. The restaurant bathroom was her regular rendezvous point. Predictable. Amateur. Did I miss anything? She asked brightly. Just discussing Dom's illustrious career, Perry said, raising his glass in mock toast. The betrayal of his own brother still cut deepest. Once close, Perry had slowly distanced himself as Dominic's public persona became that of a failure. Blood, apparently, wasn't thicker than social standing in the Harlow family. Let's not ruin dinner with that conversation, Veronica said with a tight smile. It's supposed to be a celebration. Of what exactly? Skylar pressed, leaning forward. 10 years of supporting a man who can't support himself? I'm surprised you've stuck it out this long, Ronnie. Well, I always did like projects, Veronica replied, avoiding Dominic's gaze. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, momentarily pausing the humiliation. Dominic checked his watch again. 8 minutes. Remember when Dom thought he was going to revolutionize home security systems? Perry laughed, turning to the others. Invested every penny, and then the company folded in 18 months. That venture had been deliberately sabotaged by Dominic himself. A necessary step in appearing to be a failure while he built something far more valuable in the shadows. Or that consulting firm he tried to start, Skylar added. What was it called again? Harlow Insights. Lasted all of a year. You have to admire his persistence, Abbott offered, which might have been kind if not for his patronizing tone. Dominic simply nodded, accepting each barb with apparent resignation. The waitress approached with their main courses, giving him a discreet nod as she placed his plate before him. Right on schedule. At our anniversary dinner, my wife's sister said, he's still broke? Surprised you haven't left him. My wife laughed, give it time. My own brother nodded. Yeah, he's a real disappointment. I felt numb. The table went quiet, all eyes turning to Dominic, who had spoken these words while calmly cutting his steak. What did you just say? Veronica asked, her knuckles white around her fork. Just recounting tonight's highlights, Dominic replied mildly. For posterity. God, you're pathetic, Skylar muttered. Ronnie, seriously, when are you going to? But then, Dominic continued, his voice still calm as he checked his watch one final time. My waitress leaned in and whispered, Sir, your other guest is here. As if on cue, the waitress appeared beside their table. Sir, your other guest is here, she said, her words identical to what Dominic had just predicted. Veronica's smile vanished as she saw who walked in, and the whole restaurant went silent. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit entered, followed by two others who positioned themselves discreetly by the entrance. The man walked directly to their table, his presence commanding immediate attention. Mr. Harlow, he said with a slight nod to Dominic. Everything is prepared. Thank you, Vincent, Dominic replied, rising to shake the man's hand. Please join us. We were just celebrating my 10-year anniversary. Vincent pulled up a chair between Dominic and Veronica. A decade of patience. Impressive. Who the hell is this? Perry demanded, his confident facade cracking slightly. This is Vincent Reeves, Dominic said, as if introducing an old friend. He's my business partner. Business partner? Veronica repeated, her voice barely audible. What business? Dominic smiled. The business I've been building for the past 7 years while you've been sleeping with Leonard Russo. The color drained from Veronica's face. Skylar's hand flew to her mouth. Perry shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you're talking about, Veronica attempted, but her voice betrayed her. Of course you do, Dominic replied. Every Tuesday and Thursday at the Meridian Hotel. Occasional meetings in restaurant bathrooms when the urge strikes. Like tonight. Vincent placed a tablet on the table, sliding it toward the center. On screen was a crystal-clear image of Veronica entering a service entrance of the restaurant, followed moments later by a handsome man in his early 40s. Leonard couldn't join us tonight, Dominic continued conversationally. He's currently having an interesting conversation with some associates of Vincent's. What have you done? Veronica whispered, real fear entering her eyes for the first time. Nothing compared to what all of you have done, Dominic replied, his mask of affability finally slipping to reveal something cold and unflinching beneath. But we're just getting started. He turned to Vincent. Shall we begin? Chapter 3. Initial Revelations. The private dining room had transformed into something resembling an interrogation chamber. Vincent's men had quietly secured the area, ensuring no interruptions. The restaurant staff, generously compensated in advance, maintained a respectful distance. This is ridiculous, Perry sputtered, attempting to stand. One of Vincent's men placed a firm hand on his shoulder, guiding him back into his seat. I recommend staying for the entire presentation, Vincent said, his tone pleasant, but leaving no room for argument. Dominic surveyed the table, Veronica frozen in shock, Skylar glancing frantically between her sister and the exits, Abbott slouched in drunken confusion, and Perry, his own brother, whose face had settled into a mask of calculated assessment. Perry, always looking for an angle. For those wondering about Vincent, Dominic began, he represents Sentinel Group. Never heard of it? That's by design. We provide specialized security and intelligence services to select clients globally. You expect us to believe you're some kind of spy? Skylar scoffed, though her voice lacked conviction. Nothing so dramatic, Dominic replied. Just a man with particular skills and connections that I've spent a decade concealing from all of you. Vincent tapped on the tablet, and new images appeared, financial statements, property deeds, and surveillance photos. 7 years ago, Dominic continued, when I discovered Veronica's affair, I had a choice. Confrontation or patience. I chose the latter, and I began building something while maintaining the appearance of failure. Veronica found her voice. Whatever you think you know about Leonard and me. December 14th, 2018, Dominic cut her off. The first time, the Meridian Hotel, room 712. You told me you were having dinner with clients. Leonard told his wife he was at a business conference in Chicago. Amateur mistakes. He turned to Perry. You've known about the affair for 5 years. In fact, you've been helping facilitate it, haven't you? Covering for Veronica when needed, even lending your apartment twice when Leonard's wife became suspicious. Perry's face hardened, but he didn't deny it. And Skylar, Dominic continued, turning to his sister-in-law, you've been actively encouraging your sister to leave me. You've even introduced her to divorce attorneys. 3 by my count. You've been spying on all of us. Skylar demanded, indignation overriding her fear. I prefer to call it due diligence, Dominic replied. When surrounded by snakes, one keeps anti-venom handy. Vincent produced a folder and slid several documents across the table. Mr. Harlow has authorized me to distribute these as a preview of what's to come. Each person received a personalized dossier, thin but devastating in content. As they reluctantly reviewed the documents before them, faces paled and hands trembled. Veronica stared at evidence of her affair, dates, locations, photographs taken from a distance. There were also financial records showing how she had been siphoning money from their joint accounts into a personal fund Dominic wasn't supposed to know about. Perry's file contained details of his secret gambling debts and the money he had embezzled from his employer to cover them. Information that would destroy his career if revealed. Skylar found herself looking at proof of her tax evasion scheme for her boutique clothing business, along with evidence of prescription drug abuse she believed no one knew about. Even Abbott, the least culpable among them, received documentation of his drunken indiscretions at various business conventions. Indiscretions Skylar was unaware of. This is just the beginning, Dominic said quietly. A sample of what I've compiled over the years. What do you want? Veronica finally asked, her voice hollow. Tonight? Nothing. This is merely an announcement that the rules have changed. Dominic stood, straightening his tie. Vincent will fill you in on the details while I step out for some air. As he walked toward the door, Veronica called after him. Dom, please, we can talk about this. He turned back, studying his wife of 10 years with detached curiosity. There's nothing to discuss, Veronica. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Outside, in the cool evening air, Dominic finally allowed himself a moment of genuine emotion. His hand shook slightly as he leaned against the restaurant wall. 10 years of marriage, 7 years of deception, 5 years of planning. His phone buzzed with a text for Vincent. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2 when you are. Dominic took a deep breath, steadying himself. The initial shock value had been delivered. Now the real work would begin, the systematic dismantling of those who had betrayed him, piece by careful piece. He texted back a single word. Proceed. Chapter 4. Calculated Moves. 3 days after the anniversary dinner, Dominic sat in a sleek office on the 30th floor of a downtown high-rise. The space belonged to Sentinel Group, though no signage or directory listing indicated its existence. The view overlooked the city where he had played the role of failure for so long. Vincent entered, accompanied by a woman Dominic knew as Naomi Frost. In her early 50s with steel-gray hair in a precise bob, Naomi had been Dominic's mentor when he first entered the security intelligence field 15 years ago. They're scrambling, Naomi reported, taking a seat across from him, each in their predictable ways. Dominic nodded. Details? Your wife contacted Leonard immediately after the dinner. They've met twice since then, panicking about exposure. Naomi slid a tablet across the desk, showing surveillance photos. She's also consulted with a divorce attorney, though not one of Skylar's recommendations. Smart move on her part. And my brother? Perry attempted to cover his embezzlement tracks. Vincent interjected. Clumsy work. He's also reached out to 3 of your former business associates, presumably looking for leverage. Skylar moved assets into offshore accounts and increased her prescription dosage, Naomi replied. Abbott's sleeping in the guest room after she received his file. Dominic absorbed this information, mentally plotting the next moves. The first phase had been the shock of revelation. The second would be more subtle, applying pressure in specific ways to each betrayer. And Leonard Russo? Dominic asked. Nervous, but arrogant, Vincent replied. He believes his position as regional director at Meridian Financial insulates him from serious consequences. He told Veronica, and I quote, "What's he going to do? He's a nobody." Dominic smiled thinly. Perfect. Let's proceed with Leonard first. The plan for Leonard Russo wasn't merely about punishing the man for sleeping with his wife. It was about demonstrating power, showing everyone involved that Dominic controlled the board. The Meridian financial audit? Naomi asked. Initiated tomorrow, Dominic confirmed. And make sure our friend in HR receives the anonymous tip about Leonard's pattern of pursuing subordinates. Leonard had no idea that Dominic had been accumulating evidence of his multiple workplace indiscretions for years, nor that Sentinel Group had recently acquired a significant but unpublicized stake in Meridian Financial's parent company. For Perry, Dominic continued, I want his employer to receive an anonymous but detailed accounting of the embezzlement, not from us, but routed through one of his gambling contacts. Make it look like the contact is trying to save himself. Vincent nodded, making notes. And for Skylar? Tax audit. Again, not traceable to us. Her offshore transfers last night triggered automated flags we've been carefully nurturing at the IRS. The three continued refining the orchestration of consequences. Dominic wasn't interested in crude revenge. He wanted precision, targeted pressure that would create maximum impact with minimal direct action on his part. What about Veronica? Naomi finally asked. Dominic paused, staring out at the city skyline. Despite everything, this part was still the most difficult. Nothing yet, he decided. She's last. I want her to watch everything unfold around her first. Later that evening, Dominic returned to the house he shared with Veronica. They had barely spoken since the anniversary dinner, moving around each other like ghosts. He found her in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, staring at nothing. We need to talk, she said when he entered. I disagree, Dominic replied, opening the refrigerator. Dom, whatever you think happened with Leonard. I don't think anything, Veronica. I know, with precision. He closed the refrigerator, a bottled water in hand. 7 years, 43 hotel visits, 17 weekends when you were supposedly with Skylar. I have the receipts, literally and figuratively. Her face crumbled. Why didn't you just confront me when you found out? Why this elaborate scheme? Because you, your sister, and my brother made me into a joke, Dominic replied, his voice steady. You all decided who I was without bothering to know the truth. So I let you believe what you wanted while I built something else. And what exactly have you built? She challenged. This mysterious business with that terrifying man? Is it even legal? Dominic laughed softly. Sentinel Group is perfectly legitimate, Veronica. Specialized security consulting for high-net-worth clients and corporations. The company I quietly founded while you all mocked my failed ventures. I don't believe you. Your belief is irrelevant. Facts remain facts. He moved toward the door, then paused. By the way, Leonard's having a difficult day today. You might want to check on him. As if on cue, Veronica's phone chimed with a message. The color drained from her face as she read it. Dominic left her there, walking upstairs to the home office he rarely used. Inside, he unlocked a hidden panel in the bookshelf, revealing a secure terminal. Logging in, he reviewed the day's events. Leonard Russo had been called into a surprise meeting with Meridian Financial's board of directors regarding irregularities discovered during a routine audit. Simultaneously, 3 women from different departments had filed sexual harassment complaints against him, encouraged by an anonymous HR advocate. By close of business, Leonard had been suspended pending investigation. Dominic closed the terminal with satisfaction. The first domino had fallen exactly as planned. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. Perry's employer received the embezzlement evidence. Police involvement expected by morning. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The only variable was how his targets would react under pressure. Would they turn on each other, or would they attempt to unite against him? Either scenario had been anticipated and prepared for. Dominic lay in bed that night, listening to Veronica crying quietly in the guest room. The sound brought him no pleasure, but it no longer moved him to compassion either. She had made her choices over years, consistently and deliberately. Now she would face the consequences, just like the others. Tomorrow would bring the next phase, escalation. Chapter 5, Pressure Points. Leonard Russo paced his living room at 3 a.m., phone pressed to his ear. You don't understand. They have everything. Account manipulations, client fund misappropriations I didn't even remember doing. On the other end, Veronica's voice was strained. Leon, I can't talk now. Dom might be listening. Of course he's listening. Leonard hissed. That's the whole point. Your pathetic husband isn't what he seemed. He's destroying me. I'll call you back, Veronica whispered before hanging up. Leonard threw his phone against the wall. In just 4 days, his life had imploded. Suspended from Meridian Financial, facing multiple harassment allegations, and now evidence of financial improprieties had emerged. His wife had taken the children to her mother's after the harassment stories leaked to local business publications. The doorbell rang, startling him. At this hour, he approached cautiously, checking the security camera feed on his phone. A woman he didn't recognize stood at the door in a business suit despite the late hour. Against his better judgment, he opened the door slightly, security chain engaged. Mr. Russo? Naomi Frost, representing Dominic Harlow. Leonard's face contorted with rage. Get the hell off my property before I call the police. The police are already quite interested in you, Mr. Russo, but I'm here to offer an alternative. Despite himself, Leonard hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Across town, Perry Harlow was being escorted from his apartment in handcuffs, neighbors watching from doorways. The evidence against him had been overwhelming and meticulously documented. Embezzlement systematically carried out over 3 years. As officers placed him in the police car, Perry spotted a familiar black SUV parked down the street. Though he couldn't see the occupants, he knew his brother was watching. Somehow, impossibly, Dominic had orchestrated all of this. Meanwhile, Skylar received an early morning visit from IRS investigators armed with specific information about her tax evasion scheme. They had documentation of every false deduction, every hidden income stream, every offshore transfer. As they cataloged financial records in her home office, Skylar's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. This is only the beginning. DH. By noon, Dominic sat in Sentinel Group's conference room with Vincent and Naomi, reviewing the morning's developments. Leonard took the offer, Naomi reported. As expected, self-preservation trumped loyalty to Veronica. He'll provide detailed testimony about their relationship in exchange for our assistance with his legal troubles. And the documentation he signed? Dominic asked. Complete admission of guilt, both for the affair and his financial misconduct. Legally binding and witnessed. Vincent added, Perry's being processed now. Initial bail hearing tomorrow. His attorney is already floating the idea of a plea deal. Let him stew for a few days, Dominic instructed. No contact yet. Skylar's in full panic mode, Naomi continued. She's called Veronica 7 times since the IRS left. Abbott moved out this morning after she accused him of somehow causing their troubles. Dominic nodded, satisfied with the progress. And Veronica hasn't left the house. She's called her parents, Leonard, and 3 different attorneys. No one's taking her calls. That detail wasn't coincidental. Dominic had ensured that Veronica would find herself increasingly isolated. Her parents had received evidence of not only her affair, but also of disparaging comments she'd made about them in private conversations with Leonard. Every attorney she attempted to contact had been subtly warned away from representing her. It's time I had another conversation with my wife, Dominic decided. When he returned home that afternoon, he found Veronica in the living room, surrounded by papers and looking disheveled. What have you done? She demanded when he entered. Leonard's not answering my calls. Perry's been arrested. Skylar's being investigated by the IRS. My parents won't speak to me. I've done nothing, Dominic replied calmly. Each of them is simply facing the consequences of their own actions. This isn't right, she insisted. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're angry about. About what, Veronica? About being betrayed? About being mocked and ridiculed by my own family? About spending years as the butt of jokes while I worked to build something real? I want a divorce, she said flatly. Of course you do, but there's a problem. Dominic sat down across from her. You signed a post-nuptial agreement 3 years ago, remember? The one my incompetent lawyer friend drafted that you didn't bother reading carefully? Her face paled. What are you talking about? Section 12, paragraph 3. In case of infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits all claims to marital assets and property. That's not enforceable, she protested weakly. It is when accompanied by documented evidence and witness testimony, like Leonard's signed affidavit from this morning. Veronica's hands began to shake. You planned all this for years. Who are you? I'm exactly who I've always been, Dominic replied, rising. You just never bothered to look beyond what you wanted to see. He left her there, surrounded by the scattered remnants of the life she thought she had. Phase 2 was proceeding perfectly. Isolation and pressure applied precisely where each target was most vulnerable. That evening, Dominic received a call from Vincent. We may have a complication, his partner said without preamble. Perry made his phone call from jail. He contacted Leonard's brother, Thomas Russo. Thomas Russo, Leonard's older brother and a man with connections to less legitimate business enterprises. A variable they'd anticipated but hoped to avoid. How serious? Dominic asked. Unclear yet. We're monitoring. But if Thomas gets involved, activate Contingency Protocol T, Dominic instructed, and increase surveillance on all primary targets. He ended the call, contemplating this development. The potential involvement of Thomas Russo would escalate matters significantly. While Leonard operated in the world of corporate finance, his brother moved in darker circles. If Perry had somehow convinced Thomas that helping Leonard would benefit him, Dominic accessed the secure terminal in his home office, reviewing the contingency plans for this exact scenario. Sentinel Group had compiled extensive intelligence on Thomas Russo as a precaution, including evidence of money laundering through a chain of restaurants he owned. If Thomas entered the game, Dominic was prepared to change the rules entirely. Chapter 6. Counter-moves. Thomas Russo was not a man accustomed to subtlety. 6'4" with the build of a former college linebacker gone slightly to seed, he entered Vincent's office without an appointment, brushing past the security desk with the confidence of someone rarely challenged. Vincent, expecting the visit, rose calmly from behind his desk. "Mr. Russo, I was wondering when you'd appear. Where's Harlow?" Thomas demanded, his voice a controlled rumble. "Mr. Harlow is unavailable, but as his partner, I'm fully authorized to discuss any concerns you might have regarding your brother's situation." Thomas leaned forward, placing massive hands on Vincent's desk. "My brother says some nobody is systematically destroying his life. A nobody married to the woman he's been seeing. Now I find out this nobody is connected to Sentinel Group." He straightened up. "That's not very nobody at all, is it?" "Your assessment is accurate," Vincent replied, unfazed by the intimidation attempt. "Though I wonder why you've chosen to involve yourself in your brother's extramarital affairs." "Family is family," Thomas said flatly. "Leonard made a mistake. He'll end it with a woman. But his career, his reputation, that needs to be fixed." Interesting perspective. Your brother's years-long affair with a married woman is a mistake that can be remedied by simply ending it. Vincent opened a folder on his desk. "Would you characterize his financial improprieties at Meridian the same way? Or perhaps the sexual harassment of subordinates?" Thomas's expression darkened. "I don't care what he did. Fix it, or there will be consequences." "There already are consequences, Mr. Russo, for your brother, and potentially for you, should you continue on this path." Thomas laughed, a harsh sound. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "On the contrary," Vincent slid a document across the desk. "We know exactly who we're dealing with. Your restaurants in Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. Your connections to the Donovan Syndicate. The offshore accounts in the Caymans. Shall I continue?" The color drained from Thomas's face as he scanned the document. A detailed summary of his illicit business operations that not even his closest associates fully knew. Vincent continued calmly. "Mr. Harlow anticipated your involvement. He prepared for it. This meeting isn't a negotiation, Mr. Russo. It's a courtesy warning. Tell Harlow this isn't over," Thomas growled, though with notably less conviction. "Actually, it is. Your brother signed a full confession this morning, accepting responsibility for his actions in exchange for certain assurances. He also agreed to cease all contact with Veronica Harlow." Vincent stood. "I suggest you focus your energies on insulating your own operations from the scrutiny that's about to fall on your family name." After Thomas Russo stormed out, Vincent called Dominic immediately. "The elder Russo has been neutralized," he reported, "though I expect he'll make at least one more attempt before accepting defeat." "Anticipated," Dominic replied. "Proceed with the Thomas contingency regardless. I want pressure from the Donovan angle by tomorrow." By midnight, Thomas Russo was dealing with his own crisis as federal authorities began investigating one of his restaurant suppliers, a front company for the Donovan Syndicate's money laundering operation. The timing wasn't coincidental. Sentinel Group had been sitting on this information, waiting for the precise moment to deploy it. Meanwhile, Perry Harlow sat in a holding cell, his bail hearing delayed due to administrative issues, another of Dominic's machinations. He'd had 3 days to contemplate his situation, watching as his carefully constructed life crumbled. His employer had fired him publicly, his girlfriend had abandoned him, and his assets had been frozen pending investigation. When the cell door opened and Dominic walked in, Perry wasn't entirely surprised. "Come to gloat?" he asked, not meeting his brother's eyes. "If I wanted to gloat, I wouldn't have come personally," Dominic replied, taking a seat on the bench beside him. "We're beyond that now. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. You've already given me exactly what I expected, betrayal." Dominic's voice remained calm, conversational. "You sided with them against me. Your own brother." Perry finally looked up, his face haggard from sleepless nights. "They had money, position, connections. What did you have? Failed businesses and excuses. And yet here we are, you in a cell, and me." Dominic gestured to his immaculate suit. "Not quite the failure you imagined. So this is revenge. Destroy my life because I didn't believe in you." "This isn't revenge, Perry. It's consequences. You stole from your company. You facilitated my wife's affair. You mocked me publicly and privately for years. Dominic stood. I simply removed my protection. Protection? What are you talking about? Did you ever wonder why your earlier indiscretions never came to light? The drunk driving incident in college that mysteriously disappeared from records? The plagiarism accusation that was suddenly dropped? Dominic moved toward the door. I've been cleaning up your messes our entire lives, Perry. I just stopped doing it. As Dominic signaled to the guard, Perry called after him. Don, wait. I can make this right. I can help you hurt Veronica, get evidence, whatever you need. Dominic turned back, studying his brother with something like pity. That's the difference between us, Perry. I don't need your help. I never did. Across town, Veronica sat in the darkened kitchen of the home she'd shared with Dominic for a decade, a home she now realized she knew very little about. She'd spent the day discovering hidden compartments, secure locks, and subtle security measures she'd never noticed. The house itself seemed to have been constructed as some kind of fortress disguised as an ordinary suburban residence. Her phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. Parking garage. Level B. Space 23. 20 minutes. Come alone. Tr. Thomas Russo, Leonard's brother. She met him only twice, finding him crude and intimidating. But he was offering contact when everyone else had abandoned her. 20 minutes later, she entered the deserted parking garage, her footsteps echoing in the concrete structure. The black SUV was parked exactly where promised, engine running. As she approached, the passenger window lowered. Get in, Thomas ordered. Veronica hesitated, suddenly aware of the foolishness of meeting a near stranger in an empty parking garage. I said get in, Thomas repeated, more forcefully. Before she could decide, a voice came from behind her. I wouldn't do that, Mrs. Harlow. Turning, she found Naomi Frost standing there, two men in suits flanking her. Thomas swore, starting to open his door. One of Naomi's men raised a hand, revealing a pistol. This isn't your world, Mr. Russo, Naomi called calmly. Drive away now, and we'll consider this unfortunate encounter finished. After a tense moment, Thomas's window raised, and the SUV squealed away, leaving Veronica standing between Naomi and her men. Your husband anticipated this, Naomi explained, guiding Veronica toward a waiting car. Thomas Russo intended to use you as leverage against Dominic. Why are you helping me? Veronica asked, bewildered. I'm not, Naomi replied simply. I'm following Dominic's instructions. He wasn't ready for you to be removed from the board just yet. As they drove her home, Veronica stared out the window, finally understanding the true scope of what she was facing. Dominic hadn't merely discovered her affair. He hadn't simply built a secret business. He had constructed an entire shadow life, while she believed him to be a failure. And now, piece by piece, he was dismantling everyone who had wronged him, with her as the final target. Chapter 7, Revelations. 1 week after the anniversary dinner, Dominic sat in the library of his childhood home in rural Massachusetts. The modest farmhouse had been the Harlow family for 3 generations, though Perry had always been embarrassed by its simplicity. Their parents, both deceased for over a decade, had raised them with middle-class values that Perry had eagerly discarded when given the opportunity. Vincent entered, removing his coat. Everything is proceeding as planned. Leonard Russo has been formally charged with financial misconduct at Meridian. His brother Thomas is facing federal investigation. Perry's legal situation continues to deteriorate, and Skylar's tax issues have expanded to include potential fraud charges. And Veronica? Increasingly isolated. Her attempt to access her joint accounts was blocked by the bank. Her parents have formally cut contact after receiving the complete dossier on her affair. She's made 3 attempts to contact Leonard, all rebuffed. Dominic nodded, staring into the fireplace. It's time for the final phase. The plan had always been methodical. First shock, then isolation, then pressure, and finally revelation. Each betrayer would learn not only the consequences of their actions, but also the full truth of who they had been dealing with all along. The Sentinel board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, Vincent confirmed. All arrangements have been made, and our guests will receive their invitations within the hour. The following morning, Veronica found an elegant envelope slipped under the front door. Inside was an embossed invitation. Your presence is requested at the official unveiling of Sentinel Group Holdings. 11 a.m., Sentinel Tower, 30th floor. Transportation will arrive at 10:30 a.m. Attendance is mandatory. Dominic Harlow, Chief Executive Officer. Across the city, similar invitations were delivered to Perry's attorney, Schuyler and Abbott's home, and Leonard Russo's temporary apartment. At 11 a.m. precisely, they all sat in Sentinel Group's expansive boardroom, each looking diminished by recent events. Veronica, hollow-eyed and tense. Perry, unshaven and defeated in a suit provided by his attorney. Schuyler, her usual polished appearance undermined by nervous movements. Abbott, clearly uncomfortable and slightly drunk despite the early hour. And Leonard Russo, accompanied by his lawyer, his once confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled fear. The doors opened, and Dominic entered with Vincent and Naomi flanking him. He took his position at the head of the table, surveying those gathered. "Thank you for coming," he began, as if this were a normal business meeting, though coming implies choice, which he didn't have. So perhaps "thank you for your attendance" is more accurate. "What is this about, Dominic?" Veronica asked, her voice thin with strain. "This is about truth, Veronica. Something in short supply among everyone at this table." He gestured to a uniformed staff member who distributed folders to each person. "Inside you'll find a comprehensive summary of Sentinel Group Holdings, our structure, our operations, and most importantly, our assets." As they reluctantly opened the folders, expressions of disbelief spread across their faces. Sentinel Group is valued at approximately $2.7 billion. Dominic continued conversationally. "We provide specialized security and intelligence services to Fortune 500 companies, high-net-worth individuals, and select government contractors. I founded the company 7 years ago, shortly after discovering Veronica's affair with Leonard." He turned to his wife. "You wondered why I never confronted you. The truth is, your betrayal was the catalyst I needed. It freed me to return to the work I'd left behind when we married, work I excelled at. You expect us to believe you built a multi-billion-dollar company without anyone knowing?" Schuyler scoffed, though her voice lacked conviction. "Not without anyone knowing," Dominic corrected. "Without you knowing. A crucial distinction. Sentinel operates deliberately below the radar. Our clients value discretion above all else." He gestured to Vincent. "Vincent and I served together in private security operations before I met Veronica. Why I decided to rebuild that life. He was my first call." "Why bring us here now?" Perry's attorney asked. "What's the purpose of this meeting?" "Clarity," Dominic replied simply. "I wanted each of you to understand exactly who you've been dealing with and what's coming next." He pressed a button, and a screen descended from the ceiling, displaying a series of images and documents. "Veronica, you believed you were married to a failure. The truth is, everything you saw, every failed business, every financial setback, was carefully constructed. I needed to appear unsuccessful while building Sentinel without attracting attention." He turned to Leonard. "Mr. Russo, you thought you were sleeping with the wife of an insignificant man. In reality, you were creating a vulnerability in your life that I've systematically exploited." To Perry, "Brother, you chose status over loyalty. You aligned yourself with those who mocked me because it was easier than standing by family. That decision has cost you everything." And finally to Schuyler, "You judged me based on appearances, never bothering to look deeper. Your contempt revealed a fundamental character flaw that I've now used against you." Dominic stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "This meeting isn't about negotiation. It's about informing you that your lives, as you knew them, are over. Not because of what I've done, but because of what each of you did. I simply ensured that appropriate consequences followed." "You can't do this," Leonard protested weakly. It's persecution." "No, Mr. Russo. It's justice. Calculated, precise justice." Dominic moved toward the door. "Vincent will explain the specific terms for each of you. I suggest you listen carefully." As Dominic left, Vincent took his place at the head of the table, opening his own folder. "Mr. Russo, In exchange for your signed confession, certain financial charges against you will be dropped. However, the sexual harassment claims will proceed. Your position at Meridian is permanently terminated, and you will receive no severance or pension. Additionally, the non-disclosure agreement you signed prevents you from discussing any aspect of your relationship with Mrs. Harlow or face substantial financial penalties. Leonard slumped in his chair as Vincent continued. Perry Harlow, your embezzlement charges cannot be made to disappear entirely. However, in exchange for a guilty plea, you will serve a reduced sentence of 18 months in a minimum security facility. Upon release, you will be relocated to Arizona with a modest stipend. You will have no further contact with Dominic Harlow or anyone associated with him. Perry nodded numbly, already resigned to his fate. Skylar, your tax issues can be resolved with full repayment plus penalties. The alternative is criminal prosecution. Abbott, your position is less complicated. File for divorce or face public exposure of your indiscretions. The choice is yours. Finally, Vincent turned to Veronica. Mrs. Harlow, your situation is the most straightforward. The postnuptial agreement you signed is binding and will be enforced. You leave this marriage with nothing except a one-way ticket to wherever you choose to go. Your remaining personal effects have been packed and delivered to a storage facility. Access information is in your folder. Veronica stared at him in disbelief. He's throwing me out with nothing? After 10 years? On the contrary, Vincent replied coolly, he's allowing you to leave with exactly what you deserve. The house, the cars, the accounts, all assets of Signal Group, temporarily made available to Dominic's struggling public persona. They were never truly yours to claim. As the meeting concluded and each person was escorted out separately, Veronica remained seated, staring at the folder before her. He planned this for years, she said softly. While you were destroying your marriage, yes, Naomi finished for her, having remained silent until now. Dominic gave you 10 years of his life, Veronica. You gave him motivation to become what he always was, exceptional. I want to speak to him, Veronica insisted. One last time. Naomi considered this, then nodded. He anticipated that request. He's waiting in his office. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. Dominic's office occupied the corner of Sentinel Tower's 30th floor, offering panoramic views of the city below. When Veronica entered, he stood with his back to the door, gazing out at the skyline. Did you ever love me at all? She asked without preamble. He turned slowly, studying her face. 10 years of marriage, and now they were effectively strangers. Yes, he answered simply. Completely. That's why your betrayal cut so deeply. Then why all this? She gestured around them. Why the elaborate deception? The revenge plot? If you loved me, why not just confront me when you found out about Leonard? Because by then, it wasn't just about the affair. Dominic moved to his desk, leaning against it. It was about how you saw me, how you spoke about me to your family, to your friends, how you laughed when they mocked me. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. Veronica sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. And what was the disease, Dom? Contempt, he replied without hesitation. You held me in contempt. You all did. My failure to meet your material expectations translated into a deeper judgment of my worth as a person. So this was all about wounded pride? Proving you were better than we thought? No, this was about consequences. Dominic's voice remained calm, but his eyes had hardened. You chose to betray our vows. Perry chose to betray brotherhood. Skylar chose to fuel your discontent. Leonard chose to pursue a married woman. Each of you made choices repeatedly over years. Now you face the results of those choices. Veronica looked up at him, tears forming. I made mistakes, terrible ones, but this level of retribution isn't retribution, Dominic finished. It's calculation. Each of you receives exactly what your actions warranted. No more, no less. You've changed, she whispered. The Dominic I married would never be this cold, this unforgiving. The Dominic you married was a fiction, a version of myself I created because I believed that's what you wanted. A normal man with normal ambitions. He straightened, adjusting his tie. My mistake was thinking I could be less than I am for someone else's comfort. And who are you really, Dom? Some kind of corporate spy? A manipulator who builds elaborate revenge scenarios. I'm someone who values loyalty above all else, he replied. Someone who gives exactly what he receives. You gave me betrayal, so that's what you get in return. Veronica stood, gathering what dignity she could. You won't even consider forgiveness? After 10 years together, 7 of which you spent sleeping with another man. Dominic shook his head. Forgiveness requires repentance, Veronica. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you were caught and are facing consequences. He moved to the door, opening it to reveal Naomi waiting outside. Your flight to Miami leaves at 7 p.m. I suggest you don't miss it. This isn't over, Dom, Veronica said, her voice finding some of its old strength. People don't just disappear from each other's lives after a decade together. Actually, they do. Quite easily, in fact. Dominic met her gaze one final time. Goodbye, Veronica. After she was escorted out, Vincent entered the office, finding Dominic staring once again at the cityscape. Phase complete, Vincent reported. Perry's attorney has accepted the plea deal. Leonard has signed all required documents. Skylar has initiated payment of her tax penalties. And Thomas Russo, backing away completely. The Donovan investigation has him fully occupied. Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident but subdued. The plan had been executed flawlessly, each betrayer now facing a future irreversibly altered by their own actions and his calculated response. What's next? Vincent asked. For them? Exactly what we've outlined. For us. Dominic turned from the window. Sentinel has a new defense contract to fulfill. I suggest we focus on that. Later that evening, as Veronica's plane took off for Miami and a future stripped of the wealth and status she had valued so highly, Dominic returned to the house they had shared. He walked through the empty rooms, memories surfacing and being systematically filed away. In the master bedroom, he opened a hidden safe behind a seemingly solid wall panel, removing a small velvet box. Inside was Veronica's engagement ring, not the one she wore, but the original one he had planned to give her. A simple diamond that represented the man he'd truly been, not the wealthier persona he'd adopted to win her. He snapped the box shut, returning it to the safe. Some memories needed to be preserved, if only as reminders of lessons learned. His phone buzzed with a message from Vincent. Perry transferred to custody. Veronica landed in Miami. Leonard's termination finalized. Skylar's first payment processed. Dominic replied with a single word, complete. The game was finished. Each player had received exactly what they'd earned. The man they'd all dismissed and mocked had revealed himself to be the architect of their downfall, using their own weaknesses against them with surgical precision. As he left the house for the final time, it would be sold next week. Dominic reflected on the journey from betrayed husband to avenging force. The satisfaction wasn't in the punishment itself, but in the restoration of balance. Actions had consequences. Loyalty mattered. Truth eventually emerged. And a man underestimated was the most dangerous opponent of all. Chapter 9. Aftermath. 6 months later, Dominic stood on the observation deck of Sentinel Tower, watching as winter gave way to early spring across the city. The company had expanded again, acquiring 3 smaller security firms and establishing a foothold in European markets. Vincent joined him, handing over a leather portfolio. The final reports, as requested. Inside were updates on each person from Dominic's previous life, detailed with Sentinel's characteristic thoroughness. Perry was 4 months into his 18-month sentence at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. He'd started writing a memoir, apparently believing his story of rise and fall would interest publishers. Prison officials reported he was a model inmate, participating in educational programs and counseling sessions. Leonard Russo had relocated to Chicago, taking a significantly reduced position at a small investment firm. The sexual harassment claims had been settled out of court, but his reputation in the financial sector was irreparably damaged. His wife had filed for divorce, gaining primary custody of their children. Skylar had sold her boutique clothing business to pay her tax penalties, moving to a smaller house in a less prestigious neighborhood. Abbott had indeed filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. She had reduced her prescription medication usage and was attending support group meetings. In Veronica, Dominic paused on her section of the report. She had remained in Miami, finding work as a marketing consultant for small businesses. Her lifestyle was modest compared to what she'd been accustomed to during their marriage. Recent surveillance photos showed her looking thinner but surprisingly centered, as if the removal of wealth had somehow clarified something essential in her. She contacted Naomi last week, Vincent mentioned, requested a meeting with you. Denied, I assume. Of course. Though she was persistent, claiming to have important information, Dominic closed the portfolio. The past is settled, Vincent. There's nothing she could tell me that would matter now. Yet as he said it, Dominic felt a flicker of curiosity. 6 months of executing his carefully constructed revenge had left him with exactly what he'd planned for: complete separation from his former life and those who had betrayed him. So why did Veronica's attempt at contact create even the slightest ripple in his certainty? Should we maintain surveillance? Vincent asked. Dominic considered this, then shook his head. No. Terminate all monitoring operations. They no longer warrant our attention. Later that evening, Dominic sat in his new penthouse apartment, reviewing acquisition documents for Sentinel's next expansion. The space was minimalist and modern, deliberately unlike the suburban home he'd shared with Veronica. No traces of that life remained except in his memory. His secure phone, used only for Sentinel's most sensitive communications, chimed with a message from an unknown number. I know about Sarajevo. We need to talk. V. Dominic stared at the screen, a chill running through him. Sarajevo, a mission from his previous life, before Veronica, before Sentinel. A mission that only 3 people in the world knew about: himself, Vincent, and Naomi. Or so he had believed. He called Vincent immediately. Veronica somehow knows about Sarajevo. How is that possible? It's not, Vincent replied, confusion evident in his voice. Those records were buried so deep that even our own systems don't contain references. Yet she just messaged me about it specifically. Dominic moved to his secure terminal, initiating encryption protocols. I need everything we have on her activities for the past 6 months. Someone has been feeding her information. Within an hour, Dominic had his answer, and it was more disturbing than he'd anticipated. Veronica had made contact with someone from his distant past, a former colleague named Maxwell Grant. Grant had worked with Dominic and Vincent on several high-risk operations, including Sarajevo, before disappearing after a mission went wrong. I thought Grant was dead, Dominic said when Vincent arrived at the penthouse with additional files. So did I, Vincent admitted. The Belgrade operation was a disaster. No bodies were recovered, but the explosion, no one could have survived that. Apparently someone did. Dominic studied the surveillance photos, showing Veronica meeting with a man whose face was partially obscured, but whose build and movement pattern matched Grant's. The question is why he's surfaced now, and why he's approached Veronica specifically. The answer became clear as they dug deeper. Grant hadn't just survived Belgrade. He had rebuilt himself with a new identity, amassing resources and connections while harboring a grudge against those he believed had abandoned him. And Dominic's very public takedown of his wife and her conspirators had put him back on Grant's radar. He's using Veronica as bait, Vincent concluded. He knows your pattern now, how thoroughly you dismantle those who betray you. He's counting on you seeing Veronica as a renewed threat. And what? Walking into a trap? Dominic shook his head. Grant knows me better than that. Unless that's precisely why he's doing it this way, Naomi suggested, joining them after being called in. He knows you'll analyze and counter any direct approach. So he's created a scenario unusual enough to pique your curiosity, but not threatening enough to trigger full defensive protocols. Dominic considered this, the tactical implications unfolding in his mind. If Grant had survived Belgrade, if he blamed Dominic and Vincent for the operation's failure, and if he had been watching from the shadows all these years, then the game Dominic thought was complete had merely entered a new phase. We need to move first, he decided. Not against Veronica. She's just a pawn. against Grant directly. The next 72 hours were a blur of intense activity as Sentinel's resources were mobilized to locate and neutralize the threat Grant represented. The operation required precision timing and coordination across multiple teams, drawing on the full scope of Dominic's strategic capabilities. By the third day, they had tracked Grant to an abandoned industrial complex outside the city. Satellite imagery showed minimal security but strategic placement of surveillance equipment, a setup designed to detect conventional approach patterns. He's expecting a team, Dominic observed, studying the tactical display. Standard infiltration protocols would trigger his countermeasures. So we don't use standard protocols, Vincent concluded. The plan they developed was audacious and high risk. Dominic would approach alone, apparently responding to Veronica's message, while Sentinel teams positioned themselves covertly using routes and methods that circumvented Grant's detection systems. As night fell, Dominic stood at the entrance to the complex, seemingly exposed and vulnerable. His earpiece carried Vincent's voice, "Teams in position. Proceed with caution." The interior was dimly lit, machinery shadows creating a maze of potential hiding places. Dominic moved forward deliberately, scanning for trip wires or pressure plates. Grant's preferred methods from their shared past. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." A voice echoed through the space. Grant stepped from behind a concrete pillar, looking remarkably unchanged despite the years. His face carried new scars, but his eyes held the same calculating intelligence. "You went to considerable trouble to get my attention," Dominic replied, stopping at a measured distance. "Using Veronica was creative, I'll admit." Grant smiled thinly. "She was surprisingly eager to help once I explained who I was." "Your ex-wife harbors significant resentment, Dominic. Though I suppose that's to be expected, given how thoroughly you destroyed her life." "Where is she now?" "Safe. Unlike us in Belgrade." Grant's smile faded. "You left me there, Dom. In that burning hellhole. Left me to die while you and Vincent extracted with the asset." "We searched for you," Dominic countered. "For 3 days after the explosion. There was no sign, because I was being held and interrogated by very dedicated individuals who wanted to know exactly who had breached their facility." Grant moved forward slightly. 6 months of questions, Dom, followed by years of rebuilding, watching, waiting for the right moment. Dominic maintained his position, aware of the tactical disadvantages of the space. "And you think this is that moment? Luring me here with vague threats and references to the past?" "No, this isn't about luring you anywhere. It's about showing you something." Grant gestured to a laptop set up on a nearby surface. The screen showed a live feed of a familiar setting, Dominic's childhood home in Massachusetts, now occupied by a young family who had purchased it after his parents' deaths. "Sentiment was always your weakness," Grant continued. "You keep everything at arm's length except the few connections that matter. Your precious little farmhouse. The place where the Harlow brothers grew up." Dominic watched as the image zoomed out, revealing small devices placed strategically around the property's perimeter. "Explosives," Grant explained unnecessarily. "Remote triggered. An innocent family erased along with the last physical connection to your past. Unless what, Max? What exactly do you want from me? Acknowledgement, compensation, a reckoning?" Grant's voice hardened. "You built Sentinel on the foundations of operations like Belgrade and Sarajevo. Operations where people like me did the dying, while people like you did the profiting. Sentinel was built long after I left that world," Dominic countered. "You're connecting unrelated events to justify your vendetta." "Am I?" "The same tactical precision you used to dismantle your wife's life is exactly what you employed in the field. The same calculated patience. The same ruthlessness." Grant moved closer still. "You haven't changed, Dom. You just found a more lucrative application for your particular skills." Throughout the conversation, Dominic had been subtly guiding Grant's movement, positioning them both where the Sentinel teams would have optimal angles if intervention became necessary. Now, he needed to keep Grant talking while the family at the farmhouse was quietly evacuated by a secondary team dispatched at the first sight of the explosive devices. What happened to you in Belgrade was a tragedy, Dominic said, allowing genuine regret to enter his voice. One I've carried with me. But this, threatening innocent people, using Veronica as a pawn, this puts you beyond redemption, Max. Redemption? Grant laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from the man who spent years orchestrating the total destruction of everyone who wronged him. Your wife, her lover, your own brother, all methodically ruined because they didn't appreciate the real Dominic Harlow. There's a difference between consequences and cruelty, Dominic replied. I gave each of them exactly what their actions merited. No collateral damage. No innocent victims. As he spoke, Dominic received the signal through his earpiece. The family had been safely removed from the farmhouse. Sentinel teams were in final position around the complex. You still don't get it, Grant said, shaking his head. This isn't about what's fair or justified. It's about pain. The pain you escaped by leaving me behind. The pain I've carried every day since. He reached into his jacket, producing a detonator. Some debts can only be paid one way. I wouldn't, Dominic warned, tensing slightly. Why not? Because your teams are in position? Because you've already evacuated the family? I know how you operate, Dom. I helped write the playbook. Grant smiled sadly. This was never about succeeding. It was about making sure you understood something fundamental. And what's that? That your perfect revenge story isn't over. That for all your calculation and precision, you missed a variable. And that error will cost you. Grant's thumb hovered over the detonator. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday, when you least expect it, the bill comes due. In the split second before Grant could press the button, a single shot rang out. Grant's expression registered surprise as he crumpled to the floor, the detonator falling from his grasp. Vincent stepped from the shadows, lowering his weapon. Some variables can be eliminated, he said quietly. Dominic knelt beside Grant, checking for a pulse and finding none. The man who had once been his colleague, who had survived against impossible odds only to be consumed by vengeance, was gone. Sweep the area, Dominic instructed the teams, now moving into the complex. And locate Veronica. Grant implied she's being held somewhere. Within an hour, they had found her, not captive as implied, but staying voluntarily in a motel 20 miles outside the city. When Sentinel operatives brought her to the complex, her expression showed not fear, but disappointment. He said you'd come yourself, she told Dominic. He said you wouldn't be able to resist the mystery. Did you know what he was planning? The family he threatened? Veronica looked genuinely shocked. What? No. He just said he knew you from before, that he could help me get some kind of settlement from you. Something I deserved after what you did. Dominic studied his ex-wife, seeing the truth in her response. She had been a tool, nothing more, a way for Grant to create an emotional connection that might cloud Dominic's judgment. You should return to Miami, he said finally. There's nothing for you here. That's it? After everything that happened, you're just dismissing me? Anger flashed in her eyes. You destroy my life, then act like I'm nothing? You destroyed your own life, Veronica, with choices made consistently over years. Dominic turned to leave. Grant is dead. Whatever he promised you died with him. This chapter is closed. As she was escorted away, Veronica called after him. You think you've won, Dom? That your perfect revenge is complete. But look at you, alone, suspicious, incapable of forgiveness or genuine connection. You've become exactly what you always were beneath the surface. Her words followed him as he returned to the command vehicle where Vincent waited. She's not entirely wrong, Vincent observed quietly. Grant found a vulnerability because it exists. Every security system has potential breach points, Dominic replied. What matters is how quickly they're identified and neutralized. In the farmhouse, secure the property. Compensate the family generously for the disruption. Triple our monitoring protocols. Dominic's voice betrayed no emotion. No more sentimentality. No more connections to the past. Later that night, as reports confirmed that all Grant's explosives had been neutralized and his limited network of associates identified for monitoring, Dominic stood in his penthouse, gazing out at the city lights. The revenge he had so meticulously planned and executed had been complete. Each betrayer had received exactly what they deserved. Yet Grant's emergence from the past and Veronica's parting words lingered in his thoughts. Had his pursuit of justice, his insistence on consequences for betrayal, transformed him into something colder, more isolated than he'd intended? He dismissed the thought. Sentiment was indeed a vulnerability, as Grant had correctly identified. In a world where loyalty was rare and betrayal common, the capacity to execute consequences without hesitation was not a flaw, but a strength. Dominic Harlow had built something remarkable from the ashes of betrayal. He had revealed his true nature not just to those who had underestimated him, but to himself. The mask of ordinary man had been necessary once, a compromise made for love. But that compromise had nearly destroyed him. Never again would he diminish himself for another's comfort. Never again would he forgive betrayal or trust blindly. And never again would he allow sentiment to create vulnerabilities that others could exploit. As dawn broke over the city, Dominic received a final report. Veronica had boarded her flight back to Miami. Perry remained in prison. Leonard continued his diminished existence in Chicago. Skylar struggled with her reduced circumstances. And the Harlow farmhouse stood empty, its new owners generously compensated for permanent relocation. All connections severed, all loose ends tied. The long game finally complete. Vincent called with an update on Sentinel's newest acquisition, a cybersecurity firm with valuable proprietary technology. The board meets at 9. They're waiting for your decision. Tell them I'll be there, Dominic replied. It's time to build something new. The anniversary dinner that had revealed so much, the contempt of his wife, the betrayal of his brother, the mockery of family, now seemed distant, like a story about someone else. The man who had sat there, absorbing their cruelty while waiting for his moment, had completed his transformation. Dominic Harlow, once underestimated by everyone who should have known better, had become exactly who he was always meant to be, a man who gave precisely what he received, loyalty for loyalty, betrayal for betrayal. And he regretted nothing. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Unwelcome Truth. Gordon Mackey had built his life on precision. Every decision calculated, every relationship measured, every trust earned through blood and sweat. At 42, he commanded respect in the construction industry not through charm, but through an unwavering reputation. Cross Gordon Mackey once, and you never got a second chance. The October evening started like any other. Gordon sat in his leather chair, reviewing blueprints for his latest commercial development project when the front door opened. Melody's voice echoed through their suburban Chicago home, followed by smaller footsteps. "Gordon, honey, come meet someone special." He set down his reading glasses and walked to the foyer, where his wife of 16 years stood beside a young girl with auburn hair and piercing green eyes. The child, maybe 14 or 15, clutched a small duffel bag and looked around nervously. "This is Ruby," Melody said, her voice carrying an odd tension. "She's Loretta's daughter. She'll be staying with us for a while." Gordon studied the girl's face, something nagging at the back of his mind. Ruby had the same sharp jawline as his younger sister, the same way of tilting her head when uncertain. But it was impossible. Melody had suffered 3 miscarriages during their marriage, and they'd stopped trying years ago. "How long is a while?" Gordon asked, his voice neutral, but his eyes never leaving Ruby's face. "Loretta's going through a difficult divorce," Melody explained quickly. "Ruby needs stability while things get sorted out." Ruby shifted uncomfortably, and that's when Gordon saw it. A silver bracelet on her thin wrist. Even from across the room, he could make out the engraved letters. His heart stopped. "That's a beautiful bracelet," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Where did you get it?" Ruby looked down at her wrist, then back up with innocent eyes. "My real mom gave it to me when I was little. It says Ruby, but I've never actually met her. The people who raised me said she couldn't keep me. Gordon's hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it threatened to consume him. He recognized that bracelet because he'd had it made 15 years ago, a custom piece from a jeweler downtown. He'd given it to Melody when she told him she was pregnant with their first child, the child they'd supposedly lost. "That's lovely," Gordon managed, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "Melody, could I speak with you in the kitchen for a moment?" Melody's face went pale, but she nodded. "Ruby, why don't you go upstairs? First door on the right will be your room for now." As Ruby climbed the stairs, Gordon watched her movements. Every gesture, every step confirmed what his mind refused to accept. This girl wasn't just familiar, she was his. The child he grieved for 15 years was alive, raised by strangers while his wife had lied to his face every single day since. In the kitchen, Melody busied herself with unnecessary tasks, avoiding his gaze. "Loretta's daughter," Gordon said quietly. "Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" "What do you mean?" Melody's voice cracked. "I mean that bracelet I had made for our daughter. The one you were wearing when you told me we lost her." Gordon stepped closer, and Melody instinctively backed against the counter. "The same bracelet that girl is wearing upstairs." Melody's composure cracked. "Gordon, I can explain." "No." His voice cut through her words like a blade. "You don't get to explain. Not yet. First, you're going to tell me exactly how my daughter ended up in this house tonight. And then you're going to tell me why I spent 15 years believing she was dead." The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Gordon had always prided himself on his control, but tonight, something fundamental had shifted. The man who never forgave was about to discover just how deep betrayal could run. And Melody Mackey was about to learn that some lies cost everything. Chapter 2. Foundations of Deception. 16 years earlier, Gordon Mackey had been a different man. Not soft, never soft, but hopeful in a way that success hadn't yet burned out of him. He just started Mackey Construction with 2 employees and a single truck, working 18-hour days to build something lasting. Melody Ward had been a waitress at the diner where he grabbed coffee every morning at 5 a.m. Beautiful, charming, and seemingly impressed by his ambition. Their courtship was swift, their marriage even swifter. Gordon thought he'd found a partner who understood his drive, someone who wanted to build an empire together. He'd been wrong about many things, but never more wrong than about Melody. Now, standing in their million-dollar kitchen, Gordon watched his wife of 16 years struggle to find words. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across her face, revealing lines of guilt he'd somehow missed for over a decade. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," Melody whispered, her hands shaking as she gripped the marble countertop. "When I found out I was pregnant, you were working so much, trying to get the business off the ground." "Don't." Gordon's voice was deadly quiet. "Don't you dare make this about my work." Melody flinched but continued. "I was lonely, Gordon. You left at dawn and came home after midnight. I met someone who paid attention to me. Jason O'Connor." It wasn't a question. Gordon had always suspected something during those early years, the way Melody would mention her friend Loretta's brother just a little too often. "How did you?" "I'm not an idiot, Melody. I just chose to trust my wife." Gordon moved to the kitchen island, placing his hands flat on the surface. "Tell me about Ruby." Melody's tears started then, but Gordon felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort. Just cold calculation. "When I realized I was pregnant, I didn't know. I couldn't be sure who the father was." "You and Jason, you were both." She stopped at the look on Gordon's face. "Continue." "I thought it was yours. I really did. But when Ruby was born, and she had Jason's green eyes, his red hair," Melody's voice broke. "I panicked. I told you we lost her and gave her to a family in Wisconsin. Jason's cousin and his wife. They couldn't have children." Gordon processed this information with the same methodical approach he used for construction projects. Foundation first, then structure, then the details that would either support or destroy everything. "So for 15 years, my daughter has been living 3 states away while I mourned her death. While I watched you pretend to grieve alongside me." He looked up, and Melody stepped back at the expression in his eyes. while you continued your affair with the man who might be her father. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Gordon straightened, and despite being only average height, he seemed to fill the room with menace. Tell me, Melody, how many times did you visit Ruby over the years? How many times did you watch my daughter grow up while I believed she was dead? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Answer me. Jason's cousin sends pictures sometimes. I've seen her maybe 4 or 5 times when I visited Loretta in Milwaukee. Melody's voice was barely audible. She's been asking more questions lately about her birth parents. That's why she's here. The family that raised her thought it might be good for her to meet her biological mother's friend while they figure out how to tell her the truth. Gordon laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. They have no idea who I am, do they? They think you're just a family friend, not her mother. And they certainly don't know about me. Melody shook her head. And Jason? Does he know his daughter is sleeping upstairs in our house tonight? He doesn't know about tonight. He's been pushing for Ruby to learn the truth. He wants to be part of her life. Gordon nodded slowly, pieces of a plan already forming in his mind. Jason O'Connor had always been small-time, a charming drifter who worked construction when he needed money and disappeared when he didn't. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd taken something that belonged to Gordon Mackey. Here's what's going to happen, Gordon said, his voice returning to the measured tone that had intimidated competitors for years. Ruby is going to stay here as long as she wants. You're going to be the perfect hostess, the caring family friend. And you're going to call Jason tomorrow and tell him about our unexpected guest. Gordon, what are you planning? He looked at his wife, really looked at her, for what he knew would be the last time with any trace of the love he'd once felt. I'm planning to give everyone exactly what they deserve, he said, starting with the truth. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked as Ruby moved around her temporary room, unpacking the few belongings she'd brought. Gordon listened to the sound of his daughter's footsteps and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose beyond business, beyond success. He was going to get his daughter back, and he was going to destroy everyone who had stolen her from him. The game had begun, and Gordon Mackey never lost. Chapter 3, Blood and Blueprints. Ruby Mackey, though she didn't know that name belonged to her, was nothing like the shy, uncertain girl Gordon had first imagined. Over breakfast the next morning, she displayed a sharp intelligence and curiosity that reminded him painfully of himself at that age. So you're in construction? She asked, methodically eating the pancakes Melody had nervously prepared. Like building houses? Commercial mostly, Gordon replied, studying her face in the morning light. The resemblance was even stronger now. She had his mother's nose, his grandfather's stubborn chin. Office buildings, shopping centers, warehouses. That sounds complicated. Do you have to know math and engineering and stuff? Quite a bit, yes. Do you like math? Ruby's face lit up. I love it. My parents, they always said I was too smart for my own good. She glanced at Melody, who was washing dishes with unnecessary intensity. Mrs. Mackey, you never mentioned you knew my mom before. Melody's hands stilled on the plate she was scrubbing. It was a long time ago, Melody said carefully. We weren't close friends, just acquaintances who stayed in touch. Gordon watched this exchange with the detached interest of a predator studying prey. Every lie Melody told was another nail in her coffin, and she was building that coffin with impressive efficiency. His phone buzzed. A text from his foreman, Cameron Klein. O'Connor showed up this morning asking about work. Want me to hire him on the Riverside project? Perfect timing. Ruby, Gordon said, pocketing his phone. How would you like to see a construction site today? I need to check on one of my projects. Really? That would be amazing. Melody, why don't you come along? And maybe invite Loretta to meet us there. I'd love to finally meet Ruby's mother. The color drained from Melody's face. I don't think that's necessary. I insist. Gordon's tone brooked no argument. Family should stick together, don't you think? 2 hours later, Gordon stood at the edge of the Riverside commercial complex, watching Ruby explore the construction site with the enthusiasm of someone discovering a new world. She peppered Cameron with questions about steel beams and foundation work, displaying an intuitive understanding of structural engineering that made Gordon's chest tight with pride and rage. She should have been asking him these questions years ago. She should have grown up in his house, learned these skills at his side, inherited the empire he was building. Instead, she'd been hidden away like a dirty secret while he grieved a daughter who was very much alive. "Boss," Cameron approached, hard hat in hand. "O'Connor's over by the crane if you want to talk to him." Gordon nodded, his eyes finding Jason O'Connor immediately. Tall, still handsome despite 43 years of hard living, with the same green eyes and auburn hair that Ruby had inherited. He was laughing with some of the crew, that easy charm on full display that had once stolen Gordon's wife and daughter. "Keep an eye on Ruby," Gordon told Cameron. "And when Melody arrives with her friend Loretta, make sure they stay near the trailer." Gordon walked across the site with the measured pace of a man who owned everything in sight. Workers nodded respectfully as he passed. Gordon Mackey's reputation for fairness was matched only by his reputation for ruthlessness when crossed. "Jason," he called out as he approached. "Good to see you again." Jason turned, his smile faltering slightly when he recognized Gordon. They'd worked together briefly years ago, before Jason's wandering nature had led him elsewhere. "Gordon Mackey, heard you were doing well for yourself." Jason gestured at the construction around them. "This is all yours." "One of several projects," Gordon replied modestly. "I understand you're looking for work. Times have been tough, you know how it is." Gordon didn't know. He'd made a point of knowing Jason's employment history, his financial struggles, his pattern of jumping from job to job whenever things got serious or complicated. "I might have something for you," Gordon said. "Skilled labor, good pay. Long-term project if you're interested in staying put for once." Jason's eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. When can I start?" "Tomorrow, if you'd like." "There's just one thing. I'm having a small barbecue this weekend at my house. Team building, you know. You should come. Bring anyone special in your life." "That's generous of you, Gordon. I'll be there." From across the site, Gordon heard Ruby's delighted laughter as Cameron showed her how to read architectural plans. The sound was pure joy, unmarred by the deception that had shaped her entire life. Soon, Jason would discover that his daughter was sleeping under Gordon's roof. Soon, Melody would have to face both her husband and her lover while pretending to be just a family friend to the child they'd stolen from him. And soon, Ruby would learn the truth about her parents, all of it. Gordon watched Jason walk away, whistling cheerfully, completely unaware that he'd just accepted an invitation to his own destruction. The man had made one fundamental error in judgment 15 years ago. He'd underestimated Gordon Mackey's capacity for patience. But patience, Gordon had learned, was just another word for planning. And his plan was finally ready to begin. The barbecue was going to be very interesting indeed. Chapter 4, Gathering Storms. Saturday morning brought an unseasonably warm October day, perfect for the barbecue Gordon had planned with surgical precision. He'd spent the week watching Ruby settle into his home, observing her habits, learning her personality. She was brilliant, funny, and had inherited his competitive streak, traits that made his stolen years with her even more painful. But pain, Gordon had learned, was excellent fuel for revenge. "Are you sure about all these people coming over?" Melody asked nervously as she arranged outdoor furniture. "Ruby's still adjusting." "Ruby's fine," Gordon interrupted, watching his daughter help Cameron set up the grill. She'd insisted on learning how it worked, approaching the task with the same methodical curiosity she brought to everything. She likes meeting new people. It was true. Over the past week, Ruby had charmed everyone she'd encountered. The mailman, the neighbors, even Tyler Wells, Gordon's usually gruff accountant who'd stopped by with quarterly reports and ended up teaching Ruby about compound interest. Besides, Gordon continued, "Isn't it time she met her biological father?" Melody went rigid. "What are you talking about? Jason should be here any minute." Along with Loretta and her family, Tyler and his wife, Cameron and his girlfriend, Vincent Carney from the bank. Gordon ticked off names like items on a shopping list. Quite the gathering. "Gordon, you can't." "Can't what? Have a barbecue? Introduce my employees to the daughter I've been getting to know?" His voice was pleasant, conversational, but Melody had learned to fear that tone over the years. The doorbell rang, and Ruby bounded toward the house. "I'll get it." Through the window, Gordon watched Jason O'Connor step into his foyer, looking around with undisguised curiosity at the obvious wealth on display. Ruby was chattering about the construction site, about how cool it was to see buildings being born from nothing. "Mr. O'Connor," Ruby called out. "Mr. Mackey said you work construction too. Do you know about foundation work?" Gordon couldn't hear Jason's response, but he saw the man's face go pale as he really looked at Ruby for the first time. The recognition was instant and devastating. Jason was staring at his own features reflected in a 15-year-old girl. "Oh no," Melody whispered. "Gordon, please." "Please what?" "Please continue protecting the man who helped you steal my daughter? Please keep lying to Ruby about who her parents are?" Gordon's voice remained calm, but his eyes were ice. "Those days are over, Melody." Jason stumbled into the backyard, his face ashen. Ruby had already moved on to greet Cameron's girlfriend, Kayla Hand, leaving Jason to process what he'd just discovered alone. "Gordon," Jason's voice cracked. "That girl in there. Beautiful, isn't she? Smart as a whip, too. Melody's been telling everyone she's a friend's daughter, staying with us temporarily." Gordon handed Jason a beer with mock hospitality. "But you recognize her, don't you?" Jason's hand shook as he accepted the bottle. "How long have you known? About Ruby being alive?" "Since last Monday." "About you being her biological father?" "I've suspected for 15 years. Gordon's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "The question is, what are you planning to do about it?" Before Jason could answer, more guests arrived. Tyler Wells and his wife Beatrice, followed by Vincent Carney and his partner Ernie Davies. The backyard filled with conversation and laughter, a perfect suburban gathering that masked the drama unfolding beneath the surface. Gordon played the gracious host, introducing Ruby to everyone as a special young lady staying with us. He watched Jason struggle through small talk while stealing glances at the daughter he'd never known was his. He observed Melody trying to act normal while her world crumbled around her. "Dad," Ruby said, appearing at Gordon's elbow with a plate of burgers Cameron had grilled. The word hit like a physical blow. She'd been calling him that all week, having misheard Mr. Mackey and deciding the correction was unnecessary. "Dad!" Jason's voice was strangled. Ruby looked between the two men, sensing tension she didn't understand. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Gordon said, his arms settling protectively around Ruby's shoulders. "Jason was just asking about you. He's curious about your interests, your school, your life with your adoptive family." "Oh," Ruby brightened. "Are you interested in adoption? Because I could tell you all about it. My parents are great, but I've always wondered about my biological family." Jason looked like he might be sick. "Oh, have you ever wanted to meet them? Your biological parents?" "Sometimes," Ruby admitted. "Especially lately. My adoptive mom, she always said my birth mother loved me, but couldn't keep me. And my birth father," she shrugged. "I used to imagine he was someone important, someone who'd be proud of me if he knew I existed." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Tyler's wife laughing at something Cameron had said. Jason stared at Ruby with naked anguish, and Gordon felt a satisfaction so pure it was almost intoxicating. This was what betrayal cost. This was what happened when you stole from Gordon Mackey. "Well," Gordon said cheerfully, "perhaps someday you'll get to meet them. Family has a way of finding each other, don't you think?" As if summoned by his words, Loretta McGuire appeared at the back gate with her husband and 2 young children. Gordon had been wondering when Melody's accomplice would arrive. "Melody," Loretta called out, her voice overly bright. "Sorry we're late. Traffic was—" She stopped short when she saw Ruby. Another recognition. Another face going pale with shock and fear. "Loretta," Gordon said warmly, "so good to finally meet you. Melody's told me so much about your friendship." The web was complete now. All the players were present, all the lies exposed. Ruby stood in the center of it all, innocent and trusting, surrounded by the people who had shaped her life through deception. But that was about to change. Gordon Mackey was done with other people controlling his daughter's story. It was time for the truth, and it was time for consequences. The game was entering its final phase. Chapter 5: Unraveling Threads. The barbecue had devolved into a tense gathering of conspirators trying to act normal while their shared secrets stood among them, laughing and asking innocent questions. Gordon watched it all with the detached satisfaction of a chess master seeing his strategy unfold. Ruby had gravitated toward Tyler Wells, fascinated by his stories about financial planning and investment strategies. She absorbed information like a sponge, asking pointed questions that impressed the older man. "She's got a head for numbers," Tyler told Gordon quietly. "You thinking about college prep? Kid like this could go far in business." "I'm definitely thinking about her future," Gordon replied, his eyes never leaving Ruby's animated face. "She deserves every opportunity." Across the yard, Jason sat on a patio chair, looking shell-shocked. Melody hovered nearby, shooting desperate glances between her husband and her lover, while Loretta made stilted conversation with the other guests. The weight of 15 years of deception was crushing them all, exactly as Gordon had planned. "Mr. Mackey?" Ruby appeared beside him, her face bright with excitement. "Mr. Wells was telling me about compound interest, and I had this idea for a math project. Could I maybe visit your office sometime and see how you calculate costs for construction projects?" Gordon's heart swelled with pride and pain. This brilliant, curious girl should have been in his office every weekend, learning the business that would someday be hers. "I'd love that," he said. "In fact, why don't you come by Monday after school? I'll show you how we bid on projects." "Really? That would be amazing." Ruby threw her arms around his waist in a spontaneous hug that made Gordon's carefully controlled emotions threaten to break free. When she ran off to tell Cameron about her upcoming office visit, Gordon found Jason standing beside him. "She's incredible," Jason said quietly, his voice thick with regret. "All these years, I never knew." "No, you didn't," Gordon agreed. "You were too busy running from responsibility to wonder what happened to the consequences of your actions." "Gordon, I need to tell her the truth." "Do you?" Gordon's voice was deceptively mild. "And what truth would that be, Jason? That you seduced my wife 15 years ago? That when she got pregnant, you both decided it was easier to fake a miscarriage and give the baby away rather than deal with the complications? That my daughter has been calling strangers mom and dad, while her real father grieved her death?" Jason flinched with each word. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." Gordon's mask of civility finally slipped, revealing the rage beneath. "You took my child, Jason. You stole 15 years of her life from me. And now you want to tell her the truth? For what? To ease your conscience. She has a right to know. She has a right to know that her father built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. She has a right to know that she's heir to an empire. She has a right to know that someone has loved her every day of her life, even when he thought she was dead." Gordon stepped closer, and Jason involuntarily backed away. "But she doesn't need to know that her biological father is a worthless drifter who abandoned her before she was born. You can't keep this from her forever. Watch me." The confrontation was interrupted by Melody's sharp intake of breath. Gordon followed her gaze to see Ruby deep in conversation with Loretta by the garden shed, their heads bent together over something in Loretta's purse. "Oh no," Melody whispered. Gordon strode across the yard with Jason trailing behind him. As they approached, he could hear Loretta's voice, strained and artificial. "Just some old photos from when your mother and I were younger. She was so beautiful, and she loved you so much." "Wait," Ruby said, her voice sharp with intelligence Gordon had come to recognize. "This woman in the pictures looks exactly like Mrs. Mackey." Loretta's face went white as Ruby held up a photograph, obviously one of Melody during her pregnancy 15 years ago. "And look," Ruby continued, studying the photo with the same methodical attention she brought to mathematical problems. "She's wearing my bracelet, the one my birth mother gave me." The silence that followed was deafening. Ruby looked from the photograph to Melody, her green eyes, Jason's eyes, wide with dawning realization. "Mrs. Mackey." Ruby's voice was small, uncertain. Are you my mother?" Gordon felt the moment crystallize around them like shattered glass. All his careful planning, all his strategic maneuvering, and the truth was coming out through a careless photograph and his daughter's sharp mind. But perhaps this was better. Perhaps Ruby discovering the truth herself was more poetic than any revenge he could have orchestrated. "Ruby," Melody's voice cracked. "I can explain. Explain what? Ruby's voice was rising, drawing attention from the other guests. Explain why you've been pretending to be a family friend while I've been living in the same house as my biological mother. Explain why you let me call you Mrs. Mackey when you're actually my mom. Gordon watched his daughter process the deception, saw the intelligence that had drawn him to her twist into hurt and anger. This was the moment that would define the rest of Ruby's life, and he was not going to let anyone else control it. "Ruby," he said calmly, drawing her attention away from Melody's stammering explanations. "Come inside with me. Let's talk." She looked at him with those green eyes so like Jason's, but with an expression that was pure Gordon Mackey, calculating, unforgiving, and utterly focused. "Okay," she said quietly, "but I want the whole truth. All of it." As they walked toward the house, Gordon glanced back at the wreckage of the barbecue. Jason stood frozen in place. Melody was crying, and Loretta looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. The other guests were beginning to realize that they'd wandered into the middle of a family crisis. Perfect. It was time for Ruby to learn exactly who her father really was. And it was time for everyone else to learn what happened when you betrayed Gordon Mackey. The reckoning had begun. Chapter 6. Truth and Consequences. Gordon led Ruby into his study, the one room in the house that was truly his. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the subtle scent of expensive cigars created an atmosphere of power and permanence. Ruby sat in the chair across from his desk, her posture rigid with barely controlled emotion. "How long have you known?" she asked without preamble. "Since the moment you walked into this house wearing that bracelet," Gordon replied honestly. "I had it made for your mother when she told me she was pregnant. She said we lost you in the second trimester." Ruby absorbed this information with the same methodical approach she brought to mathematical problems. "So for 15 years, you thought I was dead?" "Yes. And for 15 years, my actual mother has been lying to your face every single day." "Yes." Ruby was quiet for a long moment, staring at the family photos on Gordon's desk. Pictures of him and Melody at various company functions, vacation shots, anniversary celebrations. A life built on deception. "What about him?" she asked finally. "The man outside who keeps looking at me like he's seen a ghost." "Jason. He's my biological father, isn't he?" Gordon had prepared for this moment, but he found himself struggling with how much truth to share. Ruby deserved honesty, but she also deserved protection from the full ugliness of her origins. "Genetically, probably," he said carefully. "Your mother was having an affair when she got pregnant. She couldn't be certain which of us was the father until you were born. And when she saw I had his eyes and hair, she panicked and gave me away rather than face the consequences." "Yes." Ruby stood and walked to the window, looking out at the guests milling around the backyard. Gordon could see her mind working, processing emotions and information with frightening efficiency. "What kind of man is he?" she asked. "Jason, I mean." This was the moment Gordon had been waiting for. The chance to ensure Ruby understood exactly what kind of people had shaped her life through their selfishness. "Jason O'Connor is charming, unreliable, and has never committed to anything long-term in his life," Gordon said. "He drifts from job to job, relationship to relationship. He's worked for me twice over the years, and both times he left without notice when something more interesting came along. And he never tried to find me? Never wondered what happened to the baby he might have fathered? Not once." Ruby nodded slowly, her reflection in the window showing a face that looked far older than 15. "So my biological mother gave me away to hide her affair, and my biological father couldn't be bothered to care what happened to me." "Ruby, but you." She turned to face him, and Gordon was struck by the steel in her young face. "You grieved for me. You thought I was dead, and you mourned me. Every day. And now that you know I'm alive, what do you want?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Gordon had planned elaborate schemes of revenge, complex plots to destroy the people who had betrayed him. But faced with his daughter's direct gaze, all of that seemed suddenly less important than the simple truth. "I want what I should have had 15 years ago," he said. "I want to be your father. I want to teach you about the business I've built, show you the world I've created. I want to give you every opportunity you've been denied. Even though I might not actually be your biological daughter, Genetics don't make a father, Ruby. Love does. Commitment does. Being there does. Gordon's voice was firm. I loved you before you were born. I grieved you when I thought you were gone. And I love you now that I've found you again. That makes me your father in every way that matters. Ruby was quiet again, processing this declaration. Outside, Gordon could see the barbecue dissolving as guests made awkward excuses to leave. The confrontation was clearly visible through the windows. Melody crying, Jason pacing, Loretta trying to mediate. What happens now? Ruby asked. That depends on what you want, Gordon said. Your adoptive parents love you, and they've given you a good life. If you want to go back to Wisconsin and pretend none of this happened, I'll arrange it. But if you want to stay here, if you want to be part of this family, the real family you should have had from the beginning, then we'll make that happen too. And Ruby nodded toward the window. What happens to the people who lied to both of us for 15 years? Gordon smiled, and for the first time, Ruby saw the ruthlessness that had built his empire. What do you think should happen to them? Ruby was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled back, an expression that was pure Gordon Mackey. I think, she said slowly, that people who lie about something this important shouldn't get to control the story anymore. I couldn't agree more. Together, they walked back outside to face the wreckage of the barbecue. Most of the guests had left, but Jason, Melody, and Loretta remained, clearly waiting for some resolution to the crisis. Ruby, Melody approached with red-rimmed eyes. Please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Ruby said calmly. You gave me away as a baby to hide your affair, then spent 15 years lying to the man who thought I was dead. I understand perfectly, but I loved you. No, Ruby's voice was sharp. If you loved me, you would have found a way to keep me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let Dad think I was dead. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth years ago instead of letting me call strangers Mom and Dad. Jason stepped forward hesitantly. Ruby, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that if you had realized what? That actions have consequences? That sleeping with someone else's wife might result in pregnancy. Ruby's eyes were cold. I don't need anything from you, Mr. O'Connor. I never have. Gordon felt a surge of pride watching his daughter dismiss the people who had betrayed them both with such controlled disdain. She had inherited his ability to cut someone down to size with words alone. Now, Ruby continued, I think it's time for everyone to leave. Dad and I have things to discuss. The use of Dad, when referring to Gordon, combined with her dismissal of Jason, was a dagger to the heart of both her biological parents. Gordon could see them both crumble under the weight of Ruby's rejection. As the guilty parties gathered their things and made hasty exits, Ruby stood beside Gordon watching them go. I want to stay here, she said quietly. I want to learn the business. I want to be part of the family I should have had from the beginning. What about your adoptive parents? They love me, and I love them. But they lied to me too, didn't they? About who my mother was, about whether you existed. Ruby's voice was matter of fact. I think it's time I learned the difference between people who lie to protect themselves and people who sacrifice for the people they love. Gordon put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, feeling a completeness he hadn't experienced in 16 years. Welcome home, Ruby Mackey. The war was far from over, but Gordon had already won the most important battle. He had his daughter back, and she was choosing him over the people who had stolen her away. Everything else was just cleanup. Chapter 7, Building Empire. 6 months later, Gordon watched Ruby present her analysis of construction costs to the Mackey Construction Board of Directors with the pride of a man seeing his legacy secured. At 16, she understood project management and profit margins better than executives twice her age. The Riverside expansion project could be completed 14% under budget if we adjust the material procurement timeline. Ruby concluded, her presentation flawless. I prepared 3 alternative scenarios based on different supplier negotiations. The board members, seasoned construction veterans who had known Gordon for decades, looked impressed. Vincent Carney, Gordon's banker and longtime friend, leaned forward with interest. This assumes we can secure better steel prices, Vincent said. What's your confidence level on those negotiations? 87%, Ruby replied without hesitation. Dad's been teaching me about supplier relationships. The key is understanding that everyone has something they need more than money. Gordon smiled. In 6 months, Ruby had absorbed more about business than most people learned in years. She'd moved in permanently after a difficult but necessary conversation with her adoptive parents in Wisconsin. They'd been hurt, but understanding, recognizing that Ruby needed to explore her biological family relationships. More importantly, Ruby had shown no interest in maintaining contact with Melody or Jason. Both had tried repeatedly to establish relationships with her, but Ruby had dismissed their efforts with the cold efficiency Gordon had taught her. Family, she told him once, is about who shows up consistently, not who shares your DNA. After the presentation, Gordon walked Ruby through the executive offices, pointing out the subtle indicators of success he'd learned to read over the years. See how Tyler keeps his desk? Gordon gestured toward their accountant's workspace. Everything organized, accessible, but not obsessively neat. That tells you he's detail-oriented but flexible. And Cameron? Ruby asked, studying their foreman's cluttered office. Cameron's desk is chaos, but he can find any document in 30 seconds. He thrives on control disorder. Different systems work for different people. They paused outside Gordon's corner office, with its panoramic view of downtown Chicago. The city sprawled below them, a testament to the empire Gordon had built through determination and ruthlessness. Is this going to be mine someday? Ruby asked quietly. If you want it, Gordon replied. But you'll earn it, not inherit it. I didn't build this company to hand it over to someone unprepared. Good, Ruby said with satisfaction. I wouldn't want it any other way. Gordon's phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. O'Connor showed up at the West Side site asking about Ruby. Security escorted him off the property. It was the third time in 2 months that Jason had tried to approach Ruby through her school or Gordon's construction sites. Each attempt had been met with swift legal consequences. Problem? Ruby asked, noticing Gordon's expression. Nothing I can't handle, Gordon assured her. Let's talk about your college plans. They'd moved to his office when Ruby's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It's my mom, she said. Melody, I mean. Should I answer? That's your choice, Gordon said carefully. He learned not to forbid contact, but to trust Ruby's judgment about the people who had betrayed them both. Ruby answered the call, putting it on speaker without Gordon's prompting, a level of trust and inclusion that never failed to move him. Ruby, honey, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Melody's voice was strained, desperate. Please, can we just talk? We're talking now, Ruby replied coolly. I mean in person. I know you're angry, but I'm still your mother. No, you're not, Ruby interrupted. Mothers don't give their children away to hide affairs. Mothers don't let fathers think their children are dead. You're the woman who gave birth to me, but that's all. Ruby, please. Is there something specific you need? Ruby's voice was pure Gordon Mackey, polite but impatient. Jason and I have been talking. We want to try to be a family. All of us together. The silence that followed was electric. Gordon watched Ruby's face transform from mild annoyance to genuine anger. You want to be a family, Ruby repeated slowly. After 16 years, you suddenly want to be a family. It's not too late. It was too late 15 years ago when you chose deception over truth. It was too late every day you let Dad think I was dead. And it's definitely too late now that I know what real family looks like. Ruby ended the call and looked at Gordon with an expression of disgust. They think they can just decide to be parents now that it's convenient, she said. They have no idea what family actually means. Gordon felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. Do you want me to have a conversation with them? Make it clear that their attempts to contact you need to stop. No, Ruby said thoughtfully. I want to handle this myself, but I want to do it right. Permanently. What do you have in mind? Ruby smiled, and Gordon recognized his own strategic thinking in her expression. I want to legally change my name to Mackey. I want to formally establish that you're my father in every legal sense. And I want to make it clear to everyone, including them, that I've chosen my family. Gordon felt something unlock in his chest, a final piece of healing he hadn't realized he needed. Are you sure? He asked. Legal adoption would cut all ties to your biological parents. They cut those ties 15 years ago, Ruby said firmly. I'm just making it official. That evening, Gordon sat in his study reviewing the legal documents Tyler had prepared for Ruby's adoption. At 16, she was old enough to consent to the process, and her biological parents' abandonment made the case straightforward. Ruby appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, an evening ritual they'd established months ago. "I've been thinking about what Melody said," Ruby said, settling into her usual chair. "About it not being too late." Gordon looked up from the paperwork, concerned. "She's wrong," Ruby continued. "It's not about timing. It's about character. She and Jason are the same people they were 15 years ago. Selfish, irresponsible, and willing to sacrifice anything to avoid consequences." "And what kind of person are you?" Gordon asked. Ruby considered this seriously. "I'm the kind of person who understands that family is built through consistent actions, not genetics. I'm the kind of person who values truth over convenience. And I'm the kind of person who doesn't forgive betrayal." Gordon smiled with deep satisfaction. "You're my daughter." "Yes," Ruby said with quiet certainty. "I am." Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, a city of opportunities and challenges that would someday be part of Ruby's inheritance. But more than the business, more than the wealth, Gordon was leaving her something more valuable. The understanding that respect and love had to be earned, and that some betrayals were unforgivable. The next morning, they would file the adoption papers. Ruby Mackey would become official, and the last chapter of Melody and Jason's attempts at redemption would close forever. Some mistakes, Gordon had learned, cost everything, and some people never deserved a second chance. Chapter 8. Sins of the Mother. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, jarring Gordon from the first peaceful sleep he'd had in months. Ruby had been officially his daughter for 3 months now, the adoption finalized despite Melody and Jason's desperate legal challenges. But legal victory hadn't stopped their increasingly erratic attempts to force themselves back into Ruby's life. "Mr. Mackey?" The voice was professional, clinical. "This is Dr. Patricia Coleman at Northwestern Memorial. Your wife was brought in tonight after a car accident." Gordon sat up in bed, immediately alert. "How serious?" "She's stable, but there are complications. She was intoxicated when she crashed. There's also evidence she may have been attempting to harm herself." "I'll be right there." Gordon dressed quickly and knocked on Ruby's door. At 17 now, she'd become his closest advisor and confidant, helping run Mackey Construction with a natural business acumen that amazed even Gordon. "What's wrong?" Ruby appeared in her doorway, instantly awake. "Melody's in the hospital. Car accident." Ruby's expression showed no concern, only calculating analysis. "Suicide attempt. Possibly. Are you going to see her?" Gordon paused, studying his daughter's face. Over the past year, Ruby had shown no mercy toward the people who had betrayed them. She'd refused every attempt at reconciliation, dismissed every plea for forgiveness, and had specifically requested that neither Melody nor Jason be allowed any information about her life. "I think I should," Gordon said carefully. "Why?" Ruby's question was genuinely curious, not accusatory. "Because despite everything she's done, she was part of my life for 16 years. I need to understand why she's falling apart now." Ruby nodded. "Wanting to come with you?" "No. This is something I need to handle alone." At the hospital, Gordon found Melody in a private room, her face bruised and her left arm in a cast. She looked older than her 43 years, worn down by months of failed attempts to reconnect with Ruby and the gradual disintegration of her relationship with Jason. "Gordon," she whispered when she saw him. "You came. What happened, Melody?" She turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "I was driving to Ruby's school. I know you've told him not to let me see her, but I thought if I could just talk to her for 5 minutes. You were stalking our daughter." "She's my daughter too." "No." Gordon's voice was ice cold. "You gave up that right 15 years ago. Ruby's made it clear she wants nothing to do with you." Melody began crying, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. "I made a mistake, Gordon. One mistake, and now I've lost everything. One mistake." Gordon's voice rose. "You had an affair, faked a miscarriage, gave away our child, and lied to my face for 15 years. That's not one mistake, Melody. That's a pattern of choices. I was young and scared. You were 27. You were a grown woman who chose deception over truth every single day for over a decade. Gordon studied his ex-wife. They divorced 6 months ago. Another legal battle Melody had fought and lost, and felt nothing but cold disgust. Jason left, didn't he? Gordon said suddenly, reading the desperation in her face. Melody's sobs intensified. 2 months ago, he said I was obsessed with Ruby, that I needed to move on. He moved to California. Gordon wasn't surprised. Jason O'Connor had always run when things got complicated, and watching Ruby reject them both had clearly been more than he could handle. So now you're alone, Gordon observed. No husband, no daughter, no lover. Just the consequences of your choices. Please, Melody whispered. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but could you ask Ruby to see me? Just once. I need her to know how sorry I am. Gordon looked at this broken woman who had once been his wife, who had once carried his dreams of family, and felt only satisfaction at her complete defeat. Ruby doesn't need your apology, he said quietly. She's building a life based on truth and integrity, qualities you've never understood. Your guilt is your burden to carry, not hers. I'm dying, Gordon. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. What? Liver cancer. Stage 4. I have maybe 6 months. Melody's voice was steady now, no longer crying. That's why I crashed tonight. I wasn't trying to kill myself. I was trying to reach Ruby before it's too late. Gordon processed this information with the same methodical approach he brought to business problems. Melody dying changed nothing about what she'd done, but it might create complications for Ruby if she learned about it later. Does Jason know? No. No one knows except the doctors and now you. And you want to use your cancer to manipulate Ruby into seeing you. I want to tell my daughter I love her before I die. She's not your daughter anymore. Legally, biologically, emotionally, she's mine. You made sure of that when you chose Jason over your family. Gordon stood to leave, then paused at the door. But I'll tell her about your diagnosis. Not because you deserve her time, but because she deserves to make an informed choice about whether to see you. Thank you. Don't thank me. Ruby will decide based on who you actually are, not who you claim to be. And we both know who you actually are, Melody. Gordon left his ex-wife alone in her hospital room, facing the consequences of a lifetime of selfish choices. Driving home through the empty Chicago streets, he felt no sympathy for her pain, no regret for his harsh words. Some people deserve to die alone. When he arrived home, Ruby was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and a plate of sandwiches. How is she? Ruby asked without preamble. Dying. Liver cancer. Ruby absorbed this information without visible emotion. How long? 6 months, maybe less. And she wants to see me. Yes. Ruby was quiet for several minutes, processing. Gordon waited, knowing better than to influence her decision. What do you think I should do? She asked finally. I think you should do whatever will let you sleep peacefully for the rest of your life, Gordon said. Neither forgiveness nor revenge will change what she took from us, but you need to decide which choice you can live with. Ruby nodded slowly. I want to think about it. Take all the time you need. As Gordon watched his daughter grapple with this final test of her character, he felt proud of the young woman she'd become. Ruby Mackey would make her decision based on her own moral code, not on manipulation or guilt. And whatever she decided, Gordon would support her completely. After all, that's what real fathers did. Chapter 9. The Final Judgment. 3 weeks later, Ruby stood in the doorway of Melody's hospital room, studying the woman who had given birth to her with the same analytical gaze she used to evaluate construction projects. Gordon waited in the hallway, giving his daughter the space to make her own choice about this final confrontation. Melody looked fragile against the white hospital sheets, her skin yellow from liver failure, her once beautiful face gaunt with illness. She was awake, but clearly struggling, the cancer having progressed faster than anyone had expected. Ruby, Melody whispered, her voice barely audible. You came. I came to say goodbye, Ruby said, her tone neither cruel nor kind, simply matter of fact. Dad told me you're dying. I'm so sorry, baby. For everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but... You're right, Ruby interrupted. You don't. Melody's face crumpled, but Ruby continued with the relentless logic that had made her Gordon's perfect heir. I've spent the last 3 weeks thinking about what you took from me. Not just the 15 years with Dad, but the foundation those years would have given me. The confidence that comes from knowing your father believes in you. The security that comes from understanding that family means something. I was trying to protect. You were protecting yourself. Ruby cut her off again. Every choice you made was about avoiding consequences, avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding responsibility. You gave me away because keeping me would have been inconvenient. Melody tried to speak, but Ruby wasn't finished. But here's what you need to understand before you die. Despite everything you took from me, I turned out exactly as I should have. Dad taught me that actions have consequences, that trust is earned, and that family is built through consistency and sacrifice. Everything you failed to give me, you provided. Please, Ruby, I love you. No, you don't. Ruby's voice was steady, controlled. Love requires sacrifice. Love means putting someone else's needs before your own. You've never loved anyone more than you love yourself. Gordon watched from the hallway as his daughter delivered this final judgment with the precision of a surgeon. There was no anger in her voice, no emotion at all, just a cold assessment of facts. I came here because I wanted to look at you one more time and confirm what I already knew, Ruby continued, that you're exactly the person I thought you were. Selfish, weak, and ultimately irrelevant to my life. Ruby, please. I'm not Ruby to you. I'm Ms. Mackey, and I'm here to tell you that your death changes nothing. You'll be forgotten as completely as you chose to forget your responsibilities as a mother. Ruby turned to leave, then paused. There's one thing I want you to know before you die, she said without turning around. I'm going to be extraordinary. I'm going to build something bigger than anything you could have imagined. I'm going to carry Dad's legacy forward and create my own empire. And none of it, not one single achievement, will have anything to do with you. With that, Ruby walked away, leaving Melody alone with the weight of her choices. In the hallway, Gordon fell in a step beside his daughter as they headed toward the elevator. How do you feel? He asked. Complete, Ruby said simply. She needed to know that her confession didn't change anything, that her guilt wasn't my responsibility to resolve. Any regrets? Only that it took 17 years to have that conversation. Gordon smiled with deep satisfaction. Ruby had passed the final test of her character, choosing clarity over sentiment, justice over false mercy. Melody died 4 days later, alone except for the nursing staff. Neither Gordon nor Ruby attended the funeral, though they learned from Tyler Wells that Jason had returned from California for the service. Fewer than a dozen people attended, a testament to the shallow relationships Melody had cultivated throughout her life. 1 month after the funeral, Ruby stood before the Mackey Construction Board of Directors in her first official capacity as Vice President of Strategic Development. At 17, she was the youngest executive in the company's history, but her presentation commanded the same respect Gordon's decisions had earned over decades. The Millennium Commerce Center represents our largest undertaking to date, Ruby explained, her voice carrying the confidence of someone born to lead. But it's also our opportunity to establish Mackey Construction as the premier commercial developer in the Midwest. Vincent Carney, now in his 60s but still sharp, leaned forward with interest. The investment is substantial. What's your risk assessment? Minimal, Ruby replied without hesitation. We've secured anchor tenants for 60% of the space before breaking ground, and our construction timeline accounts for every variable Dad's taught me to consider. Gordon watched his daughter command the room with the same authority he'd spent decades developing, and felt the deep satisfaction of a legacy secured. Ruby Mackey would take his empire further than he'd ever imagined possible. After the meeting, they stood together on the construction